Hello, everyone, and welcome to What We Know About Grading with Freddie Jesus. She is an education consultant and classroom fellow for social studies schools. She's got a degree in applied learning and development and a master's in literacy. And currently, she's teaching second grade at Cowan Elementary School in Austin, Texas. So we're super excited to have you here. I'm going to be monitoring the chat
Thank you.
box, so sorry, I should pause there. Please use that feature to comment or ask questions, and I will monitor that for Freddie as she's going through the presentation. Everyone is muted, and we are looking forward to what works and what doesn't about grading. So I'm going to go ahead and not waste any more time and turn this over to Freddie.
Thank you so much. What we know about grading, what works, what doesn't, and what's next, by Thomas Guskey and Susan M. Brookhart. What works in grading? Let's ask ourselves, what are grades? According to our book, What We Know About Grading, by Thomas Guskey and Susan M. Brookhart, grades are the symbols assigned to individual pieces of schoolwork or a way educators measure student performance. From these symbols, report cards and other summative documents are created. Grades can be letters, numbers, figures, or any set of descriptors that designate levels of performance. Although grading has been part of education since the early 1800s, only in recent years has it become a major focus of education practitioners, policymakers, and researchers. Grades are meant to communicate academic performance. They also carry an emotional value that can affect a given student's self-image. A student takes a course and is assigned grades for their work. The assigned grades affects many aspects of the student's life, both directly and indirectly. Their academic decisions affect many levels of their life with far-reaching consequences. For example, a given score could affect student placement, whether it be in an AP advanced placement class or a remedial class. It also affects grade promotions, such as from 9th to 10th grade, or end-of-year awards and honors, as well as many post-secondary opportunities. It impacts administrative and school leadership levels, such as graduation rates and school performance indices. From the given grades, families and parents make decisions based on school grades. For example, parents may chide students to perform better, hire a tutor to assist them, or even contest a grade if they believe it's inaccurate or unfair. Even though there's been 100 years of research on the subjective nature of grades, mixed grading practices still have occurred. Grades are consistently the strongest predictors of kinder through 12th educational persistence, completion, and transition from high school to college. So, grades are multidimensional. Grades are not subjective or unreliable, and they enable the teacher to assess things like persistence and student engagement. And these are reliable predictors. Researchers have suggestions for reliable grading. Much from the studies of the 19th and 20th century, here are some practical suggestions for grading today. First, clearly define the criteria and apply the weights consistently. Reflectively, you want to think about, does the criteria describe the student learning and not just how well they followed directions? Next, you want to take steps to ensure you're being consistent. Using score guides like rubrics, checklists, and point schemes, use model answers, grade anonymously, grade all the responses to one question before moving on. And then finally, in this suggestion of reliable grading, researchers suggest use scales with fewer categories. 3 or 4 are ideal. Letter grades are another ideal kind, like A, B, C, D, and F. You can also use proficiency categories: advanced, proficient, and basic. So what does not work in grading? Few people would question that student grades should reflect the quality of their work and not if their teacher was an easy or hard grader. Are teachers objective in the grading process? Are they reliable? Early researchers from the 1800s revealed that there was concern about this issue. What would cause variations in grading, and is it a bad thing? Initially, research was motivated by dissatisfaction, and later studies were conducted to see if variations in grading affected the quality of work or format. Researchers wanted to see if things like difference in task or teacher error impacted their outcome. In the 20th century, there seemed to be more reliability with the addition of adding a grading scale. So think about it. A grading scale typically has 100 points. That's much room for diverse grading scores. So you would have lots of variation in teacher grading with a 100-point scale. So it was recommended that scales use only 5 categories or less. Generally speaking, the early studies mainly revealed that there was much variation in grading. Looking back at it today, researchers see that there were flaws in their early research. And there was a lot of assessment design errors, and it was the criteria lacked clarity. What do teachers include in grading? When teachers were asked what they were assessing with grades, they consistently said not only student academic knowledge and achievement, but also persistence, behavior, participation, and effort. It's interesting to note that most teachers successfully use grades to reward achievement-oriented behavior and promote a widespread growth of achievement. This was kind of an aha moment for me in studying this, because I started to realize it's not really about how bright the student is, but about how persistent they are in their pursuit of the game of school. This appearance that grades assigned by the teacher are based on non-cognitive factors further implies that the myth of standardized tests being objective while teacher assessments are subjective and biased is a little concerning. In reality, the grades and standardized tests are moderately correlated. They've never been shown to have a strong relationship. Teachers often consider and include factors other than achievement in grading. Educational philosophy will influence their foundational beliefs and values about education and grading in general. However, research on teachers' grading practices says that teachers grade in a very diverse way. It's clear they mix effort and behavior into grading practice. And the very practice is so diverse that even within a school or a classroom, grading practices are diverse. So why is that? Teachers' views about the purpose, meaning, value, and consequences on student learning and motivation are often considered. A teacher's perspective on grading provides a rationale and explanation for how grading does much more than just document learning. It is rather a key element in promoting learning and motivation. It is not in the best interest of the student, however, and teachers often consider the whole child, the situation of the child, the circumstance, as well as the task assigned in grading. So how do we factor in fairness? This issue of fairness becomes problematic, particularly when students are subjected to just arbitrary grading, and the district has few or no grading policies in place. Although teachers desire to grade fairly, they also tend to include non-academic information in determining student grades with things like ability, effort, improvement, and work completion. You have problematic outcomes occurring when you mix academic and non-academic factors. This causes policymakers to increasingly distrust teachers' judgment about a student achievement. Then they go on to make policies that don't align with teacher popularity or belief systems. This mixing of cognitive and non-cognitive factors can be pursuant in making grades fair, but it can be quite challenging for school leaders to decide what is best for students. What's more is the issue of accuracy. When factors are added, such as ability, effort, improvement, or work completion in grades, it may not be legally defensible. An example of this was the court case Katzman versus the Cumberland Valley School District in 1984. It was ruled that academic grades cannot be enhanced or reduced based on actions unrelated to academic performance. Grades were to communicate evidence of student achievement and nothing else. So what do we do next? Moving into the 21st century, a new movement focused just on the skill set submitted from a student. This focus on standards gave way to standards-based learning. Well, what is standard-based learning? It's a group of many different strategies associated with the idea that clearly and accurately communicate only what students know and what they can do. What the student is capable of doing is addressed on the report cards and by these standards. This improves consistency between grades and student assessment results. This often involves changing practice to remove non-academic factors such as subject-specific grades to grade performance at the end of the marking period. So it's important to share information about grading practices and expectations with parents so they understand what the grades represent. How is it implemented? Students are scored on a knowledge of a skill. So participation, completion of work on time, following directions in class does not matter. Students meet grade level expectations in a report card format. It can be as specific as key standards like adding fractions in lieu of general content area grades like math. Another characteristic of this type of grading gives detailed information about the most important skills of the grade level. Many educators like this kind of grading system because of its transparency with students. Only skills are represented on the report card, so teachers can utilize explicitly both formative and summative assessments as implementation indicators. How is it implemented? Students are scored on knowledge of a skill. So again, participation, finishing on time, following directions, does not matter. Questions that teachers want to think about reflectively: what evidence have I collected with respect to this specific standard? What are strengths or limitations of this evidence? And based on the evidence I have, does this grade accurately reflect the student's performance? The hallmark of SBG is skill-based reporting. Teachers would grade on specific skills using a criterion reference scale. So any factors that are unrelated to the skill of interest should not affect the report card performance. These include things like completing work on time, conventions, participation, following directions. For example, if you were talking about a number sense grade, it would only be about the number sense grade and not if they turned it in on time, participated, followed directions. So elements of standards-based grading include transform percent grade correct grades into achievement levels, use scoring rubrics, allow students to retest and replace low scores with retest scores, use a variety of assessment formats, transparency with grading criteria, and assess frequently. Additional elements of standard-based grading include accepting late work without penalty, implement minimum grade policies, transform percent correct grades to achievement levels, provide extra time on assignments, and involve students in grading. Who is responsible for student grades? Although teachers assign grades to student work, it is school leaders or principals who are legally accountable when challenged. Modern teacher evaluations require principals to address the entire continuum of teachers' instructional practices, from lesson planning to grading and reporting student outcomes. But despite these accountabilities, school leaders are faced with deeply rooted grading traditions that often limit grading reform. Teachers need the guidance, support, and trust of school leaders to be successful in their efforts. District leaders can serve as positive influencers as well. It's important for school leaders to be intentional in devising grading policies that are fair, accurate, and legally defensible. When school districts have consistently enforced the application of grading policies, courts characteristically have sided with them. Research has revealed that the relationship between the school leadership and grading is of vital importance to the principal. The principal's leadership can enable or deter successful implementation of effective school grading practices. Most of the studies and research equate effective grading practices with the use of standard-based grading. Remember, SBG calls for the evaluation of student progress aligned to a specific learning criteria. It is important that principals and other school leaders look to sound research before taking action. Checking for sound empirical evidence that supports our efforts is crucial. These are some non-negotiables for grading reform. Communication. Principals must purposely communicate with parents and teachers about changes in grading. Teacher collaboration. This is a significant enabler to helping schools and districts implement effective grading and reporting practices. Training. Explicit training on effective grading practices is vital. And time. Time is required for research-based training, implementing effective practice, and time to support teachers. The purpose of the grading and the assumptions that underlie it have changed over the past century. We must think about our purpose and intent behind grading practices today. Grading practices have varied and evolved. Teachers and leaders must examine skills taught and evaluate carefully what the optimal approach to grading will be. As our approach to assessment moves from summative to formative, two things can be expected. Students will learn more, and the other is that the nature of the relationship between assessment and grading will change. Gutsky states that a stronger focus on formative assessment in the classroom changes the nature of summative assessment and grading. The role of the teacher as advocate, as reflective in formative assessment, and the role of teacher as judge, as reflective by summative assessment, stand in opposition of one another and require thoughtful consideration on the part of the teacher. This means if I'm a teacher and I'm giving formative quizzes periodically, then I will know if student Susie struggles with multiplication. I will put into place some intervention to support her in this area, so that when the summative test is given, I'm aware of student Susie's weakness already, and I'm waiting to see if improvement has been made. What We Know About Grading by Thomas Gutsky and Susan M. Brookhart. For more information on this topic, please contact your Nystrom curriculum specialist. And thank you so much for tuning in today.
Thank you so much, Freddie. That was amazing. I loved the history and I loved learning about what was today the acceptable source. I did not know that ultimately the principals were the,
Held accountable. Yeah.
of that. I did not know that, so that was very interesting to learn too. So thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat box, and Freddie will be happy to answer them. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. There will be a short poll at the end for you to just let us know how we did and where we can improve in the future. Thank you so much, everyone. I don't see any chat questions. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And that will end our session for today. We'll see you at the next webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.